Hey there, and welcome to Into the Terminal, episode 58. Today we are talking about essential Linux commands. Joining me is Mr. Nate Lager, aka the Iron Sysadmin.
Hi, everybody.
So today's going to be a grab bag, and if you're watching live, definitely put some ideas into the chat because we wanna get your feedback as well. I'm sure we've left out some awesome commands that would help you get some tasks done, but we figured we'd start out first with a bit of a use case. And so what we thought about doing was one of the more complicated tasks, and the commands tend to get a little bit gnarly, is looking for information in a log file. So these commands may look a little gruesome, but we'll walk through them piece by piece. So Nate, we are in your home lab today. So why don't you tell us what we're looking at?
So this is obviously contrived for our demo, but it's a real world example, right? So say you've got, in my case, the example today is going to be a web access log. You're trying to find a thing that happened at a certain time frame or whatever within your logs. In the days before things like log analysis tools and log parsing tools were like ubiquitous, these third-party apps, we did it at the command line with grep and awk and sed and all kinds of craziness. So we're going to go into like a quick example of just, normal fun here. Someone says there's echo. Do I sound echoey to you, Eric?
I'm not hearing any. Let me check on the stream. Go ahead and keep talking,
Sure.
and I'll see if I can track it down.
All right, so in here, I've got an access log. You can see it's just plain old ASCII text. We're going to try to find out, let's just say the request is at 4 a.m. something weird happened, right? We're going to try to find 4 a.m. So first we're going to look at what the format of this log looks like, right? Now this is an Nginx log. Again, there's a ton of data in here, but you can see that dates are in a very specific format, right? And it even gives us things like what the offset is from UTC. In this case, my server is set to UTC time. So all of these times are offset, by what, 5 or 6 hours, whatever UTC currently is different from Eastern time where I am. So those are things you're going to have to take into consideration, but we're going to ignore that for now. We're just going to say 4 a.m. UTC, something weird happened. We need to try to see what that was. So first, we're going to try to filter this down to just the time frame we're looking for, which is 4 a.m., right? So I have, see if copy and paste works. I know traditionally this show has problems with copy and paste. So
looking at you, double hyphens.
The simple command here is we're going to use grep to look for the date and the hour that we're looking for. So 10th of February, that's this morning. 2023, of course, that's today. 04 is 4 a.m. So if you look at the timestamps that are elsewhere in the log there, you can see it does, the usual hour and minute seconds, right? And then we're going to look in the access log file that I've got here. So this is going to give us all the log entries from 4 a.m. Now, that's great. We filtered it down to these are all the logs. If that's the end of your request, you're done. But this isn't quite as useful as, maybe we want to see who accessed, or maybe not who, but what IP addresses accessed this website during that time frame. So there's another tool called awk, which is great for this. So what awk can do is there's a whole basically scripting / programming language around awk, right? And I'm going to be honest, in my days as a sysadmin, I've only barely scratched the surface of the power of awk. But we're going to give you a couple quick examples here. What it'll do is awk will take every one of those lines and you can separate them into an array. And then you can spit back out pieces of that array. So what I'm doing here is same command, grep. We're going to look for that time and date, access log. We're going to pipe that in through awk. And then after awk, we're going to say print $1, which means the first thing, by default, it'll separate by spaces. And we have an example later where we separate by something else. But we're going to separate by spaces, and we're going to print the first item. These arrays don't start at 0. I don't know why they chose to do that with awk, why they don't start at 0, but they don't. $1 is the first item in the array. So we hit enter, and now we've got a bunch of IPs. Okay? However, still, we can do better, right? let's say one of these IPs did things 100 times and the other IPs did them one time, right? This is not sorted. It's not deduplicated, right? So we're going to try to deduplicate the list of IPs that we have here. So let's take things a step further here. There's two other tools called sort and unique, which will let us do this. Now, we're going to paste in a new command here. Same thing, grep. It'll grep it for the same time frame, same file. Still using awk here. Still printing that first item in the array. We're going to sort them, and then we're going to put them through unique. The reason we sort it first is because unique takes groups of things and puts them together. It's not smart enough to take things that are spread out all over a list and deduplicate them. So you have to sort them first. We do sort and unique, and now we have a list. You can see they're all sorted properly, and you can see here, like, here we had a bunch of access from this 51.222.253 range, but now they're one by one.
Yeah,
2, 4, 5, 6.
It's like something was scanning.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Maybe this is something I need to look into. This is from my own website, by the way. So maybe there's something weird going on that I need to look into, and we've just discovered it on Into the Terminal. Another cool thing you can do with unique is you can tell it to tell you how many of those, like say there were 27 instances of this .2 address, right? It'll count them. So you do unique-c, and it'll add another column that tells you how many times that item showed up in the array. So see, this one did it 3 times. And then you could then pass all this through sort again if you wanted to, and then it'll sort based on this first line, and the ones that were most frequent will show up at the top, right? So that's useful stuff too. But here, this one hit it 69 times. There could be others, right? Here's one that's 39, 10.10.0.2. Like that looks specific.
Yeah.
So right, unique can do some neat stuff. Now, what if, so we saw when we did it without the count, right? There were some of these that all came from the same range. Maybe we're curious about that range, or maybe there's a whole bunch from certain ranges, and we'd like to show that specifically. There's another thing we can do with awk that will sort them, or not sort them, but we can cut off that last octet, the last number in the IP address. So let me clean off the screen here, and then we're going to do one more of these. All right, so now we're taking the same grep, right? We're putting it through awk. We're getting just that IP address. We're sorting it, putting it through unique again. Now we're going to do awk. This -F says this is our field separator. Okay, and then we have to escape it. That's why there's a backslash here. And then a dot, which is the period that's in between the octets of an IP address. And then the array we're working with in awk is now just the IP address. So there's $1, $2, $3, $4, because there's 4 octets to an IP address, right? We're going to print out $1, $2, $3. And then we're going to put that through unique as well, because we don't want all the duplication, right? In fact, let's do unique-c, and then we can get some actual like information about how many came from each. Okay? So now you can see that 51.222.253, 20 different IPs from that range hit my website. Why? I don't know. 88 came from 166.179.37. Now, the reason you might want to filter it down like this is usually that means that they all came from the same source network, right? It could be like, maybe that's Google. I don't know. And they were spidering my website at the time. Maybe it's some, nefarious group in Russia that's trying to break into my website. The idea is that now you have some statistics that you can dig further into. You can look up who is information or whatever to try to find out where those came from. All right. And there you go. There's like a crash course in log analysis with these tools that are included with every Linux box you'll ever sit down at.
And this is a very real world example of two things. First, and the reason why we wanted to include this in today's episode was we covered what, 4 or 5, looks like 6 different commands using pipes to pipe them all together. So we can take what would be just a wall of text with pages and pages of IP addresses and access times, and we're able to start filtering things down and sorting things and getting an idea of what's out there, what could be going on, and then you can take something like that list. Maybe you see an IP address that is based in another country that maybe you're not doing business with at the time. And you realize that there's thousands of accesses within an hour-long period. You may want to look at talking to your networking team and eliminating or blocking those IP addresses at the source. In fact, I've got a Unify network here at home, and there's entire IP address languages that are IP address blocks that I've blocked at the router level, so it doesn't even come into my home website. The second thing was we covered like 6 commands or so piped together into this long string, and it looked rough. But when you break it down and you start out with let's just grab IP addresses, then let's just grab IP addresses from this time frame and add on additional commands, add on additional pipes, you can see just how incredibly powerful the command line becomes, which is why we have an entire show dedicated to the terminal, because it is incredibly powerful. And then let's say around the same time every day, you're starting to get these attacks from a third-party organization. You could actually set up some scripting that goes in and collects your access logs from that point in time. So not only can you build on these commands, but you could also schedule them, put them in as part of a bash script. So that we wanted to kind of dive in and look at a series of examples before we kind of dive into a grab bag. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and transition into the second half of the show. So excuse me, definitely be putting some of your favorite commands into the chat. Join us live every Friday, and we'll include some of your commands and examples here in the show. So we've got a bit of a problem here, Nate. I had to kick Scott off the show, at least for a week or so, because while I was out last week, he decided to sneak server with GUI into the terminal. So
that's a problem.
I had to kick him off and bring you on. So it's this whole deal. It's kind of weird when you have to fire your boss.
Definitely a problem.
That's becoming a revolving theme here on Into the Terminal. Server with GUI, or not to server with GUI. So I figured what we could do next here, and if you're watching live, definitely throw some commands into chat. If you're watching this after the fact, throw some commands in the comments. Would love to see some conversations around this. But you and Scott and I actually threw together a list of some of the commands that we're pretty fond of. So why don't we jump back into your lab server here, and let's play with a few of these.
Sounds good to me. So the first one on your list here is Tmux. I have kind of a confession to make. I'm a screen user, not a Tmux user, so you might have to help me out here.
Well, I'm going to have to fire you and bring back Scott, I guess. I mean, good grief. So Tmux and Screen are very similar, and in fact, we have an entire episode dedicated to Tmux. I don't believe it's installed by default, but what Tmux is, it's a terminal multiplexer, which allows you to have multiple terminal screens open at the same time with one terminal session. I use this a lot of times back in my sysadmin days, where you open up Tmux and open up maybe all your production database servers. That way you can be monitoring multiple servers at a time, maybe running the same command against multiple servers. Use this all the time on patch days, but Tmux is great for that. One of the other things it's really good for is if you're, I was using Tmux just the other day, I was trying to get a, it's called Foundry VTT. It's basically a virtual tabletop for role-playing games. I was going to set up Foundry here in my home lab, and I was having trouble getting the container, the application inside the container to authenticate with the server. So in one Tmux screen, I had just my command line. I was working with Podman tools, and I'd split my screen so that down below I could actually be tailing out the logs. so I could watch in real time as I'm spinning up the container what it's doing. So to get into Tmux, again, we have an entire episode dedicated to it. You just type in Tmux, and it'll open up a sort of a virtual session.
Look
You
at
notice that we've got multiple. We've got status bar at the bottom. If we do like a Control C, that'll create a second window.
Nope.
And then we could do Control B and Control 8. Actually, no, it's by default. It's okay, not Control C.
Yeah, Control C is like not a thing I think they would try to claim. Is there some escape command we have to do first?
Oh, yeah, it's Control B to
Control
enter
B.
basically command mode, and then Control C to create a new window. Also change the default configuration.
It's not working for me here, man. Control B, Control C. Something's wrong here. Maybe it's got something to do with the terminal I'm using on my local machine. I don't know.
Might be. Anyway, I'll put a link to the Tmux episode into the show notes. But you added in the next one, their name.
Yeah. So I mean, sedawk and grep. Sorry, sedawk and grep is the third one on the list. lsblk. This is a fun, maybe not fun. This is a very, very useful command. So lsblk will show you all the block devices attached to the bus on your machine. Now, this is a VM. I'm not sure what this is going to give us. Probably just all my virtual devices. There we go. So basically, this gives you a very cool summary with a nice tree output of what devices you've got, even what logical volumes and volume groups and where they're mounted, right? So this is really great. I've always used it for, it's 2 a.m. You're in the middle of a maintenance window. You've been asked to expand a volume group, right? You're a little bleary-eyed. You just woke up. You haven't had any coffee yet. And you want to make sure that the block device you're about to wipe out or format or partition is not already in use, right? So you do an ls block, and you can see what's already in use, and you can say, oh, VDB, which is the one I think was the one I needed, isn't even in the list yet. Or VDB shows up and there's nothing in it, right? Now I know what the empty volume that I need to work with is, and that's the one you want to work with, right? There's also two other commands that are very similar to this one, lspci and lsusb, which are a lot more common for use on like a desktop. You're trying to figure out where's that NVIDIA card that I'm trying to set up. What's the PCI address so I can put it into my Xorg config? Maybe I'm dating myself here, but lspci, or maybe, you're like in a compute cluster and you're trying to find the device that you want to point your GPU calculations at or something, right? lspci gives you like, this is everything I see on the PCI bus, right? And lsusb is similar. I don't even know if this is going to show me anything because, again, VM, I don't know that there's anything on the USB bus. Oh, lsusb isn't there. I must not have installed it. But lspci and lsusb are in the same vein. So if you plug in like a mass storage device, lsusb will show you, some information about the device, maybe where it ended up in the dev tree, so you know what device you're trying to work with.
And Scott pointed out an interesting point in chat that you can actually tell that you're using a virtual machine just based on the types of devices that lspci returned. So you notice a lot of comments about QEMU or VirtIO. So you can actually, I've done that in the past where it's like, I just joined this new company as a contractor, and their sysadmin team took absolutely no notes. So what am I working on here? What am I working with? So it's great to have tools like lspci and lsusb in your back pocket, so you can kind of start generating an idea of what device is this again?
Looks like Rick had a question about lspci. If you can grab that and highlight it.
There it is. If you're on a physical server, does lspci help identify a device to physical slot on the computer?
So I don't know that it makes it easy to identify the physical slot, but you see this first entry here, the 0100 whatever, right? Like that's the PCI identifier, right? So I don't know if there's a way to tie that to physical slot. I've never had to dig into that specifically. So you're saying, I found my, I don't know, Ethernet controller, and now I want to see which slot it's in. Maybe you have 3 Ethernet controllers and you want to make sure that you're tinkering with the right one. I don't know. Maybe there's a way to figure that out. I've never been in that situation.
So those addresses would tie into a physical port. You would just have to look at the like the schematic of your motherboard to figure out which one that lives in.
So it is that easy.
Yep.
Good. I was in my head, I'm like, it's probably that easy, but I don't want to say it's that easy because I'm not sure.
Sorry, I got sidetracked. I didn't realize that Solus has died. Anyway, that's a conversation for a different day. But interesting. I know some of the people who worked on Solus. Anyway, this is why I tell people I don't need any help distracting myself. I'm
right.
Awesome.
Pretty active chat today, guys. Thanks for the interaction.
Love it.
You're distracting poor Eric.
Yeah, and I just personally know some of the people that worked on Solus, so I'm kind of sad to hear it's no more. So we talked a lot about, in the top of the show, sed, awk, and grep. Definitely, those are lifesavers. We saw how powerful they are, especially when you start piping them together. The next one that I think is a little underappreciated in today's day and age of having Google and multiple monitors is the man pages. There is an entire user manual right inside of your terminal here. So I remember back in the day of having, before 3G was a thing, having a cell phone that wouldn't work inside of a data center because of all the metal. And you'd be inside the data center and wouldn't have access to an external network. So it's like, if I want to figure this out, I have 2 options. I can either figure out what my question is and then walk outside to where I can get signal and then do a search for it, or I can use the built-in tools.
At my last job, the data center was in a basement, as many data centers are, right? And cell service in a data center underground, not always great. So bringing in a laptop that's on the Wi-Fi, or if the Wi-Fi is even available in your data center, some security requirements, they'll have that blocked off, that you can't get data in and out of the data center, even over the Wi-Fi. The ability to have all the documentation for a command at your fingertips at the command line is actually really helpful. Or, I mean, hint, hint, if you're in the middle of a certification exam, it's there. You can use it. It's fair game, right? You don't remember exactly the command line that you're trying to figure out? Well, just bring up the man page. It gives it all in a ton of detail. Sometimes I have trouble finding what I'm looking for in a man page because there's so much detail, right?
Luckily, there is a way to work around that. The quickest and easiest one is to use I guess it's the /. And then you can start typing in. Maybe you're looking for. Let's see, we're looking at lspci, so maybe you want to see anything that relates to. I just see DNS there. So if you did like a / DNS, we could see any of the entries in DNS. It's basically a search function.
Right. Yeah. And they're basically the same search commands that you'd use in like Vim, right? / to search forward, ? To search backward, although there's nothing previous to find. But anyway, so yeah, do it again. It'll go to the next item. There we go. So yeah, man, very helpful. And there's other ways to get help. Those man pages are literally just text files. You can find them in user shared doc, if I remember correctly.
That sounds right.
So if you're like, I don't even know what command I'm looking for, you could go crazy and like use find and grep inside of user shared doc and find whatever you're looking for, and then give you an idea. So.
We talked about lsblk, which told us about our disk devices. If we want to see what's actively mounted, we've got a couple of options. The chat is just blowing up today. I love it.
It really is.
I kind of want to be part of the conversation because they're talking about different Linux distributions. And then, anyway, so the mount command is one of the quickest ways to decide what partitions and what disks are mounted. But there's actually a different option. So mount is one way. But the other option is to use df, and you can use I like to use -h. And then Scott and I talked about df a few episodes ago, and he told me about the -h capital P, which really cleans up the output. So this is why I love doing a community show like this, where we can have people hang out in the
Right.
chat,
You get some
because
hints
I
from other people.
I always
Yeah.
learn something. So we did a df-h capital P, and that takes a lot of what we're looking at here and cleans it up,
Yeah.
and makes it a little bit easier to read. Also tells you in human readable format how much disk you have used and how much is available.
Yeah, so I have the output of mount right now on the screen. There was a time when, before we had so many virtual file systems mounted in just about every Linux machine ever, right? Especially if you've got like a container host or a virtualization host. This gets really messy really quick, because there's so many things mounted. There's like virtual file systems and file systems in memory, and file systems that do crazy things like talk to the kernel, right? Mount shows all of those, and it gets really hard to filter that down. Now, mount may have some command line arguments that'll say strip those out. I haven't looked, because there is a better option, like we were just talking about. df, which is traditionally just a tool used to see how much disk space is available on your disks, also has the added benefit of only showing you the physical disks, right? Well, I guess tempfs is physical, but it doesn't give you like sysproc and things like that, right? So df is a lot simpler. So what were the commands we were talking about? -H does it human readable. What does -P do? Should I look at the man page?
We should look at the man page. I forgot what it did.
I don't see a difference here.
You can also do a lot of commands have a --help, which pulls up a short version of information that it pulls out of.
Use the POSIX output format. I'm still not sure if I know what that means.
Dash capital P may actually be part of the default of the command nowadays.
Okay.
I know for a long time, and maybe Rick or Scott can chime in the chat.
So yeah, df, as you can see, gives you a much more readable output. You can see, oh look, dev mapper root lv has 13% free. It gives you, I guess mount doesn't even give you free space, does it? No, it just gives you the mount options and whatnot. Right. So if you're looking for what disks are mounted, df is just an easier go-to, right? It's easier to parse through. Now, obviously, there's times when you need to see more about the mount information. That's when you'd go back to mount. Another disk-related one is du, right? So you can see what's using up space in the current directory that you're in. So that's another good one. If you're trying to troubleshoot, why is my disk full? So say I wanted to find out why /boot is 30%. du-h will tell me these are all the directories and files you have, and this is a summary of what size they are. So good things to know if you're trying to troubleshoot, like what's filling up my disk. And
I love the -h option. It's much easier than having to multiply all the results by, or divide all the results by like 1,000.
Yeah, and say it
starts to compute.
Say you have, I don't know, like, let's look at like user lib. I'm looking for a directory that has a bunch of stuff in it. So du-h gives you, oh my gosh, look at all this stuff, right? Say you're like, okay, this is great, but what do I do with this data? Now you can take this and pass it through like grep and look for like a capital G for things that are gigabytes. Right? Of course.
Which there aren't any.
I could do better to filter that down. I'm trying to be quick here. Maybe I want to filter by what's megabytes, right? You could probably do a regex or something that would filter this down to just what's in the beginning here. But you can see now it shows me they all have this capital M per megabyte. That's like a quick and dirty way to try to filter stuff down.
Yeah, and Rick in the chat here brought up a good point that you can, just like we did at the top of the show, you can go through and start adding in pipes. So with a couple of arguments in the du command, you can see what the biggest ones are, and then you could take, and then he's actually in the pipe command there, that head -10 is actually is actually just showing you the top 10. So that gives you the top 10 biggest files or top 10 biggest directories, and so you can start to filter it down to figure out what are my biggest directories here, and that'll help figure out what's going on.
So right there. So if we look, we're looking back. Sorry, that's not the file I wanted. Looking at my access log, if I do head-1 on the access log, there's just the first entry. Same deal for tail, right?
Yep.
And these are also really useful things.
Yeah, head
right?
and tail. Excellent.
Tail by default does what, 100 lines or something, or is it 10? Might be 100 lines.
I don't know. I said it the other day and was wrong, so I don't remember.
Yeah. So if you wanted to tail for like the last 1,000 entries, you can do tail-1000, right, on the access log. Or again, there's a million ways to do things in Linux. We can cat the access log and pipe it through tail and get the exact same output.
Yeah, it's 10.
I thought it was 10. And we're touching on this redirection thing, piping and whatever. Everything in Linux is a stream output, right? And you can redirect that stream through other things, and that's what we're doing with pipe. Imagine a pipe as literally a pipe, right? I've got a thing, it goes through this pipe into the other thing, right? And then the output of that can go through a pipe into another thing, right? Folks watching, maybe you already know that, but this is, some basics that maybe some people don't already understand. I know first time I was at a terminal, I'm like, I can do what now? What does the pipe do?
Right. Or I just get intimidated and go, you know what? I don't know that I want to mess with all that. I'll just use my eyeball and skim through all this text.
Yeah, right.
But it's really one of those muscles that you should practice as a sysadmin to really get comfortable with doing regexes and pipes and using some of these different commands, because you can really filter down, especially if you're on a system that's dealing with hundreds of thousands of customer transactions a day. We just looked at the Iron Sysadmin website around 4 a.m. But if you're talking Salesforce or Google or something along those lines, and you're trying to isolate odd behavior on a server, it's going to be really, really painful to visually skim through all of that.
Oh, absolutely. I see some conversation going on about more and less in the chat. Those are also really good tools we didn't put in the list.
That's why we have a live chat. I mean,
so if I wanted
to sit down and record a 30-minute video, or we could bring all of our friends and get better content.
The old school more, right, just gives you paginated output. You hit space, it gives you the next page. So you were talking about skimming through. This is a way you could skim through. Less is, I believe it's a rewrite, or at least maybe not a rewrite, but a fork of more that will give you not just paginated output, but scrollable. So now you can scroll up and down. You can search in less, right? So if I'm looking for that same, 4 a.m. In fact, there's one right there. 10 slide. I guess the slide. I'm not going to go into detail here, but you can search in it the same way you would in Vim, or like we did in Man. You can scroll with it, stuff like that, and then just hit the letter Q to get out. And Scott is in chat saying the one thing he doesn't like about less is that it clears the screen when you're done. So you found that log entry that you really, really needed to know. If you didn't copy and paste it, as soon as you quit less, boom, it's gone. Now you got to go find it again. So
right.
It looks like there's some chat about how to get around that, but the chat's going by so fast that looking at the terminal and the chat is hard to do.
Yeah, and I need more monitors for some of these episodes.
Yeah, right.
We need chat. I've got the stream. I've got the episode guide, and then way over here, I have.
We need a third host. We need a third host that just watches chat and fills us in.
If we were really cool, we'd have a producer who could do that for us, who would just flag questions as it scrolls by.
There you go. That's what we need.
I think Rick volunteered, so we'll have Rick be our producer and grab questions for us. Congratulations, Rick! Thank you for volunteering. Yeah, let's just chat GPT all of this.
Yeah, we'll just put it in a chat GPT. I'm sure it'll be fine. We'll just pipe it.
That'll fix everything.
Pipe it in.
Oh goodness. Well,
all right, so we went way off there.
Yeah. I hate to do this, but we are over time, and The chat has been awesome. Thank you all very much for joining us live. There's, of course, literally hundreds of commands that we could have talked about. These were just a few of the ones that kind of came to mind off the top of our heads. We try and do this occasionally where we just kind of have a grab bag episode. There may not be one specific thing that there may not be one specific thing you could take out of this episode, but the content and the conversation is definitely worthwhile, especially if you jump on with us live and be part of the conversation. Excuse me.
Yeah, so this was fun. It's fun to just hop into the terminal and poke around, and it was interesting to be sort of led by the chat.
Yeah, well, and that was the hope. I mean, that's why our episode guide was a little light today. But so thank you all for joining us. Make sure to like our content and share it with a friend. That way more folks can find it, and we can have more lively conversations on it. I mean, nothing better to do on a Friday afternoon than sit around and just talk about tech. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. I'd completely blanked and had to look at the notes because subscribe, it just, my brain went blank there for a bit.
Too many words.
Make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so you can hear whenever we go live. And then next week, I believe Scott and I will be back to talk about we named the episode Enterprise Up. So we kind of talk about Linux in a general sense, but we're going to talk about what does that look like on an enterprise scale. We look at servers kind of as a one-off on Into the Terminal, but what does that look like at scale? So join McBee and myself next Friday. Join Nate on the Iron Sysadmin podcast, and you can catch me in about a week and a half for RHEL Presents. We'll be talking about RHEL for the Edge. So plenty of content coming out. I know Nate and I both have some blogs we're working on, so keep an eye out for those. Follow us on Twitter. The links are in the show notes. All that said, thank you all for joining us. On behalf of Nate, myself, and the entire Red Hat Enterprise Linux team, thank you for joining us for Into the Terminal, and we'll see you next Friday.
Have a great Friday, everybody.